Just answering the rest of the questions with the Wabtec. Previous one was on the younger dry ass. I didn't make a joke. So here we go. Have you ever tried to look up the view of anywhere near a certain object on a specific date at that time in Google Earth? I know you can do it. I just don't know how to do it because I've never did it before. Title of video. So anyway, no. 90% of the images that would be useful for looking at any place on Earth at all, on Google Street View, Google Earth, Google Maps, anything involving quote-unquote satellite images and actually aerial photos and street view photography is taken at random times. There is no incremental lookup of it. No, there isn't a satellite deliberately pointed down at friendly territory in the United States by the U.S. military. The ones you'd want to look up would be the Russians. I'm not kidding about that. We do not actually do space-based or aerial-based monitoring of our military facilities because, well, in the year 2001, because the idea of an aerial attack being observed from very high above looking down is kind of silly, because somebody will just do an aerial attack from above wherever that is. If you're going to do high resolution, you have to use airplanes, not satellites. Satellites cannot read your license plate or what you're reading out of the newspaper off your computer screen from orbit, because there's certain mechanical limits on light. If you're not talking about light, the easiest way to do it would be to intercept your data at ground level. There just is a level of practicality that people assume that the U.S. government wouldn't use. And the movie Men in Black is cool, but the fact is that you're all carrying the spy equipment with you, and as of 2001, this is actually about the Pentagon, the easiest way to pick up any imagery of a airplane near the Pentagon at that time would have been to look at the data feed, and the data feed shows the actual airplane that hit. But only after the fact, because it was taken out of its black box, which was recovered. There's certain limitations on reality. You can't have an infinite number of satellites in orbit. Now, this changed after a while. I do have to point this out by using Gorgon Stare or whatever. Basically, you put up an array of cameras in bullshit grade Cessnas. They have to fly slow anyway to take a decent picture. They fly over Portland every once in a while, not all the time. Even now, in this era, the current year, we just have airplanes and helicopters fly around. They're actually airplanes because they're a little bit easier to service, that have a vast array of cell phone, I'm not kidding, cell phone cameras stuck in them, potato cams, pointed straight down and pointed in slightly different distances. So when you're at a specific altitude, it makes a very good grid with a little bit of overlay, and then it uses image stitch to stitch it together, and it does a near real-time snapshot. Real-time snapshot is a contradiction in terms of the city of Portland during an event. They can just keep flying it, and the software keeps reorienting the images north to south and jitters them a bit and gets them to line up. And what it does, it takes advantage of something really simple. The same thing you're using right now watching this on YouTube. It creates a matte image of the city that day, which means whatever foliage there is, trees, dirt, garbage, car positions, as a static image. And then if something moves, it makes note of that and makes a data point showing it moving, which means it can track something because it keeps following it. Yeah, I mean, we can use that. It's the same technology that makes Snapchat filters work with your dog, nose, and ears and tongue hanging out when you do someone will run me through a Snapchat filter, I just know it. But anyway, the point is, there is no real-time camera recording now from orbit, or from helicopters or planes. Drones could do it, but again, they don't do it either. They just don't. And the thing is, they synthesize things. Again, this is taking all that raw data and stitching it together as fast as possible. There's a lag or delay, unless you run it through a very large-scale computer. Basically, imagine on an event day when, let's say, some hoity-toity visits Portland, and the Portland police says, we're not going to do this freaking monitoring, send the CIA truck. The CIA truck, if you're curious about it, is literally a 18-wheeler that rolls up with a cab pulling away from the box. The cab parks a little ways away. It's stuck in some nondescript parking lot in North Portland, where I'm at right now. Northwest Portland, excuse me, or North Portland. And it is literally a rolling supercomputer with a cooling system on it. It's a refrigerator truck. It's not marked in any way, shape, or form. Except for the fact that if you go near it with your cell phone, it gets really fucking confused because it's a gigantic cell box. It's not a cell site, it's a cell service system. And it communicates with one or two airplanes that are sent up, and they go in a kind of a pattern over the areas that are needed to. One of them will follow whatever the dignitary is as best it can, going as slow as possible. Again, use the Cessna so you can keep down with the car or train or plane or whatever, all the way from the airport in, and it's cleared. It's always cleared. It's a stupid little, it's just a generic Cessna, and the bottom of it has a suspiciously well-polished bottom to it with thousands of pinholes with the cameras in it. Or they have a big array of lenses and say, screw it, go ahead and look at my tummy. Or it'll be, you know, even higher up, but not much higher. And there'll be another one that's just doing a generalized check of the area, and it uses threat assessment software, aka Did Something Move? It looks for patterns of movement in cars that look odd. Cars, basically what they did is they did an analysis of Los Angeles and New York City traffic and other cities. They just kept incrementally doing this. That's actually what they're doing up there if you didn't know about it. They're not monitoring you for drug deals or whatever. They're trying to collect background data to see what a city's like when nothing interesting happens. On days something interesting happens, they can retroactively look at it and see if there was a pattern. They look for where it happened, look for the cars that were there, and look for people. They can resolve down to a person and kind of identify them. And then they track them backwards to see if they're associated. This retroactive investigation has been responsible for solving some street crimes and such, but mostly it's used for one purpose: to profile everybody, not as individuals, but as species of perpetrators and innocent bystanders. NPCs versus players. So yeah, this isn't about whether or not Google or any other all-encompassing loan word for the Illuminati or for our surveillance state could have spotted these planes in flight. I'm sure a satellite would have got it, but if you've ever looked at a real raw satellite image, most of the images you get from satellites especially are total garbage because cloud cover. If you can go see through the cloud cover, it's really hard to identify objects except as saying it's a plane or it's a particular make and model of plane. And again, you have to reverse the process. After the fact, you can figure out all of it. Maybe. But it's going to be a red blotch and a blue background. And even if it's a cloudless day, you still have to sort through the cacophony of this. The reason we make our sheets of plastic have this pattern, camo pattern, is it blends in. What blends in to the earth is earth. Planes don't blend in. Yes, I understand that. But blotches do, and shadows do. And unless it's a perfect day, you're not going to track anything. It is possible there's data that day. What happens is what this person's listening to is the dumbass argument number 445 of the Gish Gallop of 911 was an inside job. Not that this person agrees with it. No, they didn't have satellites that were set up for looking down at the Pentagon to monitor the Pentagon's as an opponent to the United States. Everything the military does is to look down at the ground to see threats. Looking around supposedly the most secure location on the planet, even though it's right next to a highway, the Pentagon, it's not the most important location in the Pentagon. It was and never will be and never has been the most important location on Earth. That's window dressing. Everybody should know that if it's a famous place that's supposed to be the hub of everything, it isn't. There's a situation room in a bunker at the White House. But you don't have to go to that one. There's about a dozen others. Because lots of bunkers were put in place in the 50s. The point I'm making here is there's no reason to assume anybody would have been looking down at the Pentagon to record any of this. If I found a continuous tracking of that plane from a satellite or a group of satellites swinging over, they go over pretty quickly. I would immediately assume it was somebody monitoring their progress for their project. Look for Saudi Arabia or Syrians or the Australians doing that. That would indicate it. But the American government launching an attack on itself is, I'm just going to get to the point, it's a really stupid idea. The idea that we would track it is even dumber. Maybe this is an indication that it was done that way. But no, I don't have the ability to dig it out of Google Earth or Google Street View. And yeah, if you look up raw data from these things, some of them do exist. There were some images. Obviously, there were some satellite images. Mostly they're aerial photographs, though, of Ground Zero. And I have to point out something. CNN and all mainstream media news and alt news always misidentifies aerial photography as satellite views. They're not satellite views. If you can see, this is important, in the year 2001, if you can see distinctly the spacing between the dashes on a highway from a supposed satellite view, that's not a satellite image back then. I mean, it could be, but it's virtually non-existent that way. And most of them, if you weren't aware of it, are black and white because it works better. It uses a third of the bandwidth, or if you want to use the same amount of bandwidth, has a much higher contrast ratio. Instead of 256 to 1 like you and I deal with, those images are Targa format and have 64 grayscales, 64,000 grayscales, excuse me. It's just easier not to have what you would assume would be visible. But if we do see some someday, it'll be declassified later on. It'll be something that they picked up from a database hours after it happened. They wouldn't have been able to use it for scrambling anything, but it might be illuminating to the subject. Next, someone said, the PC apocalypse is now, and it points to a Mark Dice video where he's sitting there lamenting all the crap that's happened in the last 24 hours that day. I'll leave a link to it until I find out that it's bullshit. I don't like Dice sometimes, but sometimes he's on the money, so it'll be interesting. Anyway, the reason I brought this up is this is one of the most persistently muttered things that nobody ever responds to. You cannot use satellite information at all the way that people think you can, and the ones that can be kind of used that way, it's never color, and it's almost exclusively very special purpose, and it's almost never pointed down at the United States. No matter how much of a surveillance or police state we have, that's done from ground level and done through your cell phone. It's not done from airplanes or satellites much at all. It can be, but it's just easier to track you by looking at Facebook. You'd be surprised how effective that is. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.